Yo, it's Steven, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about 10 crazy haunted places that you can visit. Let's get started. Starting off the list at number 10, we've got Edinburgh, Scotland. In Edinburgh, they have the Edinburgh Vaults, and these vaults were created by the rich many years ago. The rich wanted to create a shopping center, and the problem with Edinburgh back in that time was that there was a lot of human waste in the streets. It was a very dirty city, and so they made these underground tunnels. During the Irish potato famine, obviously many were without work, and so many people came to the city of Edinburgh searching for something to do, some sort of job to get paid just a little bit so that they can feed their families. The city's population was growing so fast that they had nowhere to put people, so they put them in the vaults. These vaults would have up to 20 to 25 people living in each one of them, primarily young men. In 1824, in Edinburgh, there was the Edinburgh Fire, which was a huge fire that lasted for 4 days, burning literally the entire city. The people of Edinburgh had nowhere to go, so what they did is they decided to go underground to get away from the fire. They did this to avoid the fire, but they would not be able to avoid the smoke. There was so much smoke in the ventilation systems that people died from the lack of oxygen. However, the people that died from the lack of oxygen were actually the lucky ones. Many would suffer to death as the tunnels would get so hot from the fires from above that the tunnel's temperatures would rise to 400 degrees Celsius. People would die from overheating. Today, the Edinburgh Vaults can be visited, and the city of Edinburgh is a great spot if you want to go to visit Scotland. Coming in at number 9, we've got the Suicide Forest in Japan. The Suicide Forest has to do with a book called The Tower of Waves. It is a story about two young lovers who committed suicide together in the forest. This forest. The book was originally written as a fiction novel. However, as people continued to read the book, they were inspired by it, and there's been many suicides in this forest ever since. There are literally signs hanging on the trees in this forest saying, "Go back, call the suicide prevention hotline." Numbers from the past indicate that 30 to 100 people commit suicide in this forest every year. However, the government of Japan has stopped releasing these numbers in an attempt to prevent suicides along with other initiatives. There are many spirits in this forest, but the most famous one is the woman in the white kimono. She's a mysterious ghost that leads people into the forest, so much so that they get lost and then they become delirious and end up killing themselves. There's also been reported sightings of many other spirits along with their animals throughout this entire forest, and there's reports of non-malicious ghosts of people who have killed themselves in the forest, leading people that are suicidal out of the forest. However, those are much less common than the bad spirits. So that is number 9 on our list. Suicide Forest is a place that you can visit. Obviously not all of the forest is the suicide spot, but it has the name for a reason. Coming in at number 8, we've got Myrtle's Plantation in Louisiana. This is said to be one of the most haunted houses in America, with over 10 murders in the past 200 years in this exact house. In total, there are 12 reported ghosts in this house, with the most famous one being a lady named Chloe. Chloe was a slave of the second owner of the property named Clark Woodruff. Woodruff tried forcing Chloe into being his mistress, and she refused. One day, Chloe was spying on Mr. Woodruff, and he caught her spying on him. And for spying on him, he cut her ear off. In revenge, one day Chloe decided to bake a cake with poisonous plants in it and fed it to Clark Woodruff's family in hopes that Clark would eat the cake himself. However, Clark did not eat the cake, but his wife and 2 children did. His wife and 2 children died, and it is said today that his wife and 2 kids can be seen in a mirror in the house. The house was then sold to the Sterling family, and the Sterling family had the property throughout the Civil War. Throughout the Civil War, there's been many deaths that occurred at this property, many of which were Union soldiers in the Civil War, and then along with that, some of the servants for the Sterling family. The Myrtle's Plantation is a place that you can visit today if you'd like to go to Louisiana. There are open tours and people are free to go and look at the property and see if they can find any ghosts. Coming in at number 7, Salem, Massachusetts, the Salem Witch Trials, which many Americans already know this one, but this would not be a list without it. The story goes like this. 1692 to 1693, the city of Salem was a very isolated part of Massachusetts, and the people of this city were Puritans, which is a very, very strict Christian religion. It all starts with two young girls, a 9-year-old named Betty Paris and an 11-year-old named Abigail Williams, which were diagnosed by a doctor, and he said that they were possessed by the devil. The Puritans believed that the devil wreaked havoc in the world by hiring or using human agents, witches. He would give them powers to distort nature and torment children. And so when these two girls were possessed by the devil, people thought that witches were tormenting the two girls. Shortly thereafter, after the two girls were first diagnosed, there were a total of 12 girls. All of a sudden, 12 girls were claiming that they had some sort of demon within them. And 4 out of these 12 girls identified 3 ladies, 3 witches that gave them this devil possession. The 3 women were Sarah Osborne, Sarah Good, and an enslaved woman named Tituba. The enslaved woman, Tituba, confessed that she was forced by Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne to practice witchcraft on Betty Paris. The 3 ladies were sentenced to prison. Osborne actually died in prison, and Sarah Good's husband betrayed her in court, stating that yes, she did practice witchcraft, although she most likely did not. Sarah Good was also a mother, and she had a 4-year-old daughter that actually testified against her as well. When Sarah Good was imprisoned, she was also pregnant, she gave birth in prison, her baby died in prison, and she was hung, and that's the end of her story. Shortly after this, there were many, many more trials, with women being accused of being witches. The women that were accused were literally told by the judges that if they confessed, even if they didn't do it, that they would be free. But if they did not confess, then they would be executed. The trials would end in 1693, and that is the story of Salem. Today, you can go and visit Salem. It is a very strange city. The satanic headquarters are there as well, if you'd like to go see that. But that is number 7 on our list. Number 6 on our list is New Orleans, Louisiana. Not sure what it is about Louisiana, but this is the second one on our list from that state. So if you're not from the United States, you want to go to a state that is paranormal, you might as well go to Louisiana. The first sight to see in New Orleans is the Andrew Jackson Hotel, which originally was not a hotel. It used to be a boarding school for boys. However, one day there was a huge fire and many of the boys died in the building. Today, obviously, it's a hotel, and people that stay at this hotel claim to hear boys running in the hallway, knocking on doors, banging things, doing this to the handles. There's also been one report where a lady woke up in the middle of the night and saw 3 boys sitting on the edge of her bed. It is a place that many people do not dare to spend the night. The second place to visit in New Orleans is Lafitte's Blacksmith Shop Bar. The story of this bar is as follows. Pirate Captain John Lafitte helped New Orleans win the Battle of New Orleans against the British in the War of 1812. He was rewarded heavily with gold, and he kept his treasure in the swamp and at this bar. John Lafitte commanded one of his pirates to guard his gold at the bar, and obviously pirates are pirates, and he began to steal the gold. John quickly found out and decapitated the pirate, which is now the claimed to be seen spirit at the Lafitte Blacksmith Shop Bar in New Orleans, Louisiana. The pirate can be seen in the fireplace at the bar, and many people take photos of themselves at this fireplace with their iPhones or their Samsungs, and the focus of the camera catches the face of the pirate, even though we cannot see it. The third spot to visit in New Orleans, you can't really actually go in, but it's the most haunted place in New Orleans, the LaLaurie Mansion. The LaLaurie Mansion was a mansion to a man named Louis LaLaurie. Louis LaLaurie was an immigrant from Europe who was a medical student, and he and his wife held huge parties in their mansion. Many of the guests noticed that they had an oddly large number of African American slaves. And when they were questioned about it, they would push the question aside, say, oh, no, we're not going to talk about that. And any guest that would question them more was actually exiled from coming to their parties. One day there was a very large fire in the mansion, and firefighters were able to put out the fire. But as they entered the property, they found an African American lady chained in the kitchen, pointing and trembling to the upstairs. The firefighters went upstairs, and upon opening the door, they found 7 African American slaves chained to the wall with their bodies beaten, their limbs stretched and tortured. It is said that the Lalories were performing human experiments, trying to see if they can stretch the human body to new capacities, including bone and muscle tissue. In 1900, the property was converted into an Italian-styled apartment. Legend has it that a young man, young woman, and their newborn baby stayed at one of these apartments one night. The young man woke up in the middle of the night. He and his wife were in the bed, and then the baby was in the crib. When he awoke, he looked over to the crib and saw what he thought was his wife attending his child. Then he noticed that his wife was with him in bed. As soon as he realized that it wasn't his wife, he screamed, and the ghost vanished. The ghost was reported to have long, dark red, bloody hair. And when he went over to check on his baby, the baby's sock was taken off its foot and shoved down its throat. So those are the 3 places to visit if you go to New Orleans. It is one of the most paranormal cities in the United States of America. Coming in at number 5, Casa Matusita in Lima, Peru. This home was an old colonial building built for a mysterious Persian lady that moved to Lima, Peru, having 0 connections to Peru. The people of Lima thought that she was a magical healer of some sort, but quickly she was convicted of practicing witchcraft by the Spanish Inquisition. She was burned at the stake, but before she died, she set a spell saying that anybody that set foot in her house would be cursed for the rest of her life after her death. Her curse seemed to work, as many years later, a rich man purchased her land and converted the property, and he was a very abusive man as well. He mistreated his slaves and his servants. One day, the servants decided to get revenge, and the servants decided to put a drug in the drinks at their party and give it to everyone at the party, including the owner himself. Several hours later, and you could hear screaming and manic laughing coming from this room. When police opened the doors to the party room, they found limbs torn off people's bodies and blood all over the walls. The servants that did not die in this incident would never be the same again, and they were put in a mental institution for the rest of their lives. Nearly a century later, a family by the name of Matsushita decided to move in to Casa Matusita. They moved in from Japan, and everything seemed fine and normal for the first month or 2. However, things changed quickly. The husband caught his wife cheating on him, and so he took a knife, butchered her to death, killed his 2 children, and then proceeded to kill himself with the knife as well. Coming in at number 4, the most haunted castle in Ireland, the Leap Castle. The Leap Castle was built in 1500 by the O'Carrolls, which was a family clan, and they were known to be very vicious. When the father died in the 1530s, his sons began to fight for power, and one son murdered the other, and the other was a priest, and he was murdered during one of the masses that he was giving. Where Priest O'Carroll died is now called the Bloody Chapel, and it is a room inside Leap Castle that is supposedly the most haunted room in the entire castle. There are also several claims that there is a woman in red in the castle, and that you can hear her screaming at night. Number 3 is the Ancient Ram Inn in England. This place is notorious for paranormal activity because it has a long history of dark energy. First, you've got pagan rituals. Second, you've got satanic worshiping and sacrificing. Third, you've got a burial ground here. And then fourth, the Knights Templar used to stop here frequently as well. The most famous spirit in this inn is named Rosie. It's a young woman that was burned to death as she was claimed and accused of being a witch and practicing witchcraft back in the medieval ages. There's also said to be a demonic entity that lives within the walls of this inn, and along with that, several other ghostly figures. The Ancient Ram Inn is available for visiting. Visitors can come and visit this property literally whenever. Coming in at number 2, and it's a place that I'm gonna visit next year, La Recoleta Cemetery in Buenos Aires, Argentina. One of the most terrifying stories of a lady that is buried in this cemetery is the story of Rufina Cambaceres. Rufina died at 19 and her body was transferred to the Recoleta Cemetery in a coffin. Her burial was postponed due to very heavy rains, and so they kept her body, obviously in the coffin, inside the cemetery's chapel overnight. In the morning, when they went to go to obviously open the chapel, they arrived to her coffin and noticed that it had been tampered with, and the parents were afraid that somebody was trying to loot the expensive jewelry that they put on Rufina's body for her burial service. However, upon the discovery of the tampered coffin, they noticed that Rufina was bruised and that there was a lot of scratches and claw marks on the coffin. Rufina had been buried alive. She never died. She actually had a coma, and doctors claimed that she was dead when she was at the hospital. There are many other famous spirits here in the cemetery, with another famous one being the woman in white, who walks around, obviously, in white. The next story I'm about to tell is not a paranormal story, but it's one that I found very interesting and wanted to include in this video. It is another burial site in Recoleta, and this one is Liliana Crociati. Liliana Crociati was a young woman from Buenos Aires, and she flew to Austria to celebrate her honeymoon with her Hungarian husband in 1970. They stayed at a hotel, which was unfortunately hit by an avalanche. Her husband escaped, but she, unfortunately, did not survive. It never said in the article that I read about how Liliana died, but it did say that they were trapped in the hotel for many, many days. So my assumption is that she either died from just being way too cold, lack of water, or lack of food. Legend has it that her dog died in Argentina the same day that she died in Austria. Her father was a barber in Buenos Aires, and when he found out about her death, he demanded that they make a garden in La Recoleta Cementerio because Liliana believed that cutting a flower was like ending a life, and therefore her father did not want anybody to give her flowers. Today, there is a life-size statue of Liliana and her dog in this cemetery in Buenos Aires. It is said that if you go and visit this cemetery and you go and visit Liliana's statue and you touch the hocico or the snout of the dog statue, you are going to get good luck. So everyone that passes her statue touches the dog's nose, and it is a little gift of good luck from Liliana's dog. And coming in at number 1, the most haunted place in the country of Norway, the Akershus Fortress. When researching about this site, I came across many spirits and stories, and I'm not going to include all of them in here because a lot of them sound absolutely ridiculous to me, but you can do your own research. This site was established in the early 1300s, and unfortunately for the Norwegians, it was quickly overtaken in 1308 by the Swedish army, and since its construction in 1300, it was taken over many times. There was many trades of hands, all the way up until 1940 when the Nazis took over the fortress, and there wasn't even combat. The Norwegian people just surrendered. Throughout World War II, the Nazis executed many people inside this fortress, leading to many of the spirits that haunt the place today. The fortress was liberated from the Nazis in 1945, and shortly thereafter, 8 Norwegians were executed for war crimes in the fortress as well. Over the past 700 years, there have been many people imprisoned in this fortress. It's been estimated that over 1,000 prisoners died inside Akershus, and the royal grounds for Akershus is also the burial place for many famous Norwegian figures, such as King Sigurd I. People claim to hear chains clattering against the ground when they pass the old dungeon. They claim to hear screaming of ladies as they walk past the fortress walls. The most famous spirit in the fortress is a woman named Mantelgeisten. She is a woman that is faceless with a long white robe. There's also a famous ghost dog on this property. a former guard dog named Malchinison. Visitors claim to see a large black dog that is not existent, and by its side, the ghostly apparitions of former guards of the fortress. Finally, the spirits at this fortress are not hands-off whatsoever. Many people claim to have been pushed, shoved, hit, and even grabbed. So that is our list of 10 haunted places, crazy haunted places that you can go and visit. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Again, my name is Steven. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.